I have observed the world for longer than most can imagine. I have watched men and women bend beneath the weight of expectation, crumble under the judgment of others, and tremble at confrontation. They seek approval as if it were the air they breathe. They allow themselves to be moved, prodded, and directed, like leaves carried by the current of a river. They confuse reaction for choice. Pressure is not something external. It does not live in the gaze of a superior, the tone of an insult, or the whispers of a crowd. Pressure exists only where you permit it to take root. It is the mirror of your own insecurity, reflected in the world, amplified by fear, doubt, and desire. Consider a leaf in a storm. If it clings too tightly to the branch, the wind tears it away. If it sways too loosely, it is tossed violently, losing its path, its shape, its place in the world. Only the leaf that moves with the storm, adapting without resistance, survives. The one that has mastered balance, that understands the limits of rigidity and softness, will endure. The human mind is no different. Life is a storm, and the world will always attempt to impose its will. It will strike with expectation, ridicule, or threat. Those who fear it are controlled by it. Those who resist blindly are broken by it. Only those who cultivate detachment, composure, and clarity can exist untouched, as if the storm passes around them, leaving them unscathed. I have seen men tremble at a single word. I have seen warriors falter when their honor was questioned. I have seen those who believed themselves strong crumble like brittle glass, not because they were weak, but because they did not understand the nature of pressure. Pressure is not a test of strength. It is a revelation of self. To become impossible to pressure, one must first understand the source of pressure. It is not the world that weighs upon you. It is the world reflected through the lens of your fear. Fear is the root. Fear that you are not enough. Fear that your choices are wrong. Fear that others will see you for what they believe you are, inadequate. Pressure thrives on this fear. It feeds on hesitation, on doubt, on the smallest crack in the armor of the mind. Remove the fear, and the pressure loses its power. But fear is not removed through confrontation or defiance. It is removed through observation, through stillness, through understanding. One must watch oneself as a detached observer, noting every impulse, every reaction, every flicker of insecurity. Only by knowing the exact shape of your fear can you begin to dissolve it. Imagine a pond in the dead of night. The surface is dark, still. A stone falls, sending ripples outward. If the pond is shallow or cluttered with weeds, the ripples disturb everything, reaching the bottom, stirring debris, creating chaos. But in a deep, clear pond, the ripples fade quickly, leaving the depths untouched. The mind, like that pond, must cultivate depth. The deeper it becomes, the less the surface disturbances of the world can affect it. Pressure is inevitable. It will come in many forms: a harsh word, a critical glance, an expectation that feels impossible to meet. But to allow yourself to be moved by it is optional. You may tremble, you may react, you may fall, but these are choices, not inevitabilities. Observe the leaf, the pond, the storm. Learn the rhythms of movement and stillness. Understand that bending is not always weakness, and resistance is not always strength. The one who is impossible to pressure does not react to the world because they have no fear of it. They move according to their own principle, guided by clarity rather than emotion. Even when surrounded by chaos, they are calm. Even when criticized, they are composed. Even when threatened, they are unmoved. This does not make them untouchable. They are still human, but it makes them free. Free from the control of others, free from the manipulation of circumstance, free from the illusions that most mistake for reality. And freedom, though invisible, is the most dangerous form of power. To achieve this, one must cultivate solitude, not as punishment, not as escape, but as a method of refinement. In solitude, the mind is stripped of distraction. In silence, the truth of self becomes visible. The fears that fuel pressure are confronted, observed, and understood. Only then can the mind become a fortress, and the individual become immovable. The world will always seek to control, to provoke, to test, but those who have mastered themselves are not moved by such trials. They are still, like the deepest pond. They are flexible, like the leaf in the storm. They are neither rigid nor weak, but something stronger, something almost unseen, the mastery of self. And this mastery, this impossible to pressure state, is not given, it is earned. Through patience, through reflection, through the willingness to watch oneself without flinching, through the discipline to let the world reveal itself while remaining unchanged. The leaf bends, the storm rages, the pond ripples, and yet, at the center, there is stillness. This stillness is not empty, it is not void. It is life understood. It is power without violence. It is freedom without chaos. To become impossible to pressure is to become the eye of the storm. It is to understand that the world may rage, but it cannot touch the depths of one who has mastered themselves. I have observed the words of men and women, spoken and unspoken. Words are powerful. They are weapons capable of wounding, of piercing, of shaping perception. A careless word can ignite fear. A sharp accusation can unravel confidence. And yet the one who understands the weight of silence wields a far greater weapon than any blade. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not surrender. It is armor. It is a wall that no force can penetrate unless you allow it. It is a space where the mind is free to observe, to reflect, and to act without the distortion of impulse. When someone seeks to provoke you, through mockery, manipulation, or coercion, resist the immediate reaction. Do not allow the first impulse to dictate your actions. Observe, listen, let their energy strike, and find no response. Let it crash against the wall you have built with patience and self-control. To remain silent in the face of pressure is not cowardice, it is mastery. By refusing to react, you drain the instigator of power. By staying unmoved, you teach a subtle lesson. Your mind cannot be owned, your will cannot be bent, and your focus is your own. Those who rely on provoking others are weak. They seek movement, and in finding none, they reveal their own instability. The world is filled with those who demand attention, who test boundaries, who push against you to see if they can break you. They mistake motion for influence. They confuse reaction for control. But one who wields silence understands the truth. Influence exists only where there is vulnerability. Remove the vulnerability, and the influence disappears. Consider a shadow cast on the ground. It moves and stretches according to the light, yet it has no substance. One can attempt to manipulate the shadow, but the shadow itself cannot resist nor react. Only by acting on the source of light, not the shadow, can control be exerted. In the same way, pressure is a shadow of fear, and silence allows you to act from the source, rather than be distracted by the projection. Observe how those who are easily moved give away their power. A raised voice, a judgment, a slight criticism, each is a blade to them, and they flinch, waver, falter. They react immediately because their mind has not been trained to withstand disturbance. Their armor is thin, their roots shallow, and their foundation shaky. Silence is the ultimate training. It teaches patience. It reveals truth. It allows clarity to form where chaos threatens. When one speaks too quickly, decisions are clouded by emotion. When one acts immediately, the response is often reactionary, and therefore predictable. Silence, however, creates space. Space to observe, space to understand, space to choose. One who practices silence learns to distinguish between that which requires response and that which does not. Not every word demands an answer. Not every accusation deserves defense. Not every challenge merits engagement. By conserving energy, by remaining calm, by letting the world expose itself, you move unseen, untouchable, and unstoppable. Silence also protects the mind from internal pressure. When you learn not to speak unnecessarily, when you learn not to justify yourself to others, you begin to see the source of pressure more clearly. You realize that the world's judgment is often arbitrary, transient, and irrelevant. The only authority that truly matters is your own. Think of a sword. A blade in motion is dangerous, but a sword sheathed, held firmly, is more threatening than one swung recklessly. Those who rush to speak, to react, to argue, reveal themselves. The one who remains calm, who observes, who acts deliberately, holds true power. The world may not understand this at first. Many will see your silence as weakness. They will test it repeatedly. They will attempt to provoke, to unsettle, to force a crack. But each attempt that meets your stillness teaches them nothing. They find no purchase, no movement, no fracture. Silence is not passive, it is strategy. It is the practice of invisibility within presence. It allows you to conserve energy, focus and strength for the moment when action is truly required. And when that moment comes, your response is deliberate, precise, and impossible to predict. I have seen those who rely on words falter. I have seen those who react impulsively stumble into their own traps. I have seen those who wield silence calmly navigate storms that would destroy others. This is not luck. It is discipline. It is training. It is mastery of self over impulse. To cultivate silence, one must first cultivate observation. Every attempt to provoke you should be noted. Every subtle manipulation, every veiled threat, every unspoken expectation must be recognized. Observe not to respond, but to understand. Understand the patterns, the intentions, the weaknesses of others. This awareness is a shield, stronger than any physical defense. And then, remain still. Let the world rage. Let the voices shout. Let the threats multiply. All of this exists only on the surface. Below, in the depths of your mind, there is calm, there is clarity, there is control. And in that stillness, the mind becomes untouchable, the will becomes unbreakable, and the individual becomes impossible to pressure. The practice of silence is not easy. It requires patience. It requires endurance. It requires courage. It demands that you walk alone at times, unrecognized, unseen, but unshaken. Those who choose this path often appear detached, even cold, to the world. Let them perceive as they will. Their perception is irrelevant. What matters is the strength forged in silence. Remember this: those who seek to move you are often desperate. They require motion to feel control. Deny them that motion. Let them act in vain. Let their energy crash against your stillness. And in this you gain power invisible to others, yet absolute within yourself. A mind trained in silence is a fortress. It is a mountain unmoved by storms. It is a pond so deep that ripples fade before reaching the bottom. It is the calm in the eye of chaos, the unmoving center that allows all else to shift without consequence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of strength, clarity, and mastery. It is armor against the pressures of the world. It is the practice of becoming impossible to move. I have watched people tremble at the slightest disturbance, a sharp word, a critical gaze, a subtle provocation. These are enough to break the untrained mind. And yet the source of their collapse is rarely the external threat. It is the internal weakness, the unexamined fear, the reliance on the opinions of others for validation. Those who become impossible to pressure understand a simple truth. Power over oneself is the only power that cannot be stolen. Authority over your emotions, over your reactions, over your attention, is absolute, invisible, and unstoppable. People pressure you because they sense vulnerability. They seek to test limits, to force cracks, to bend the mind to their will. But the one who has cultivated emotional sovereignty is unmoved. They understand that external disturbance is meaningless unless given permission to matter. Ask yourself, why should my tranquility depend on the moods of others? Why should my focus falter because someone attempts to distract, intimidate, or manipulate me? Why should my energy be spent on defending a self that only exists in the perception of others? The answer is simple. It should not. Emotional sovereignty is not coldness. It is not detachment from life. It is mastery of the self. The unmovable mind recognizes the storm as a storm, not a threat, the insult as a sound, not a wound, the judgment as an echo, not a verdict. And in this recognition lies freedom. Consider the ocean. Storms rage on its surface. Waves rise and fall. Wind tears across the water. And yet, in the depths, there is stillness. There is power. There is vastness untouched by the turbulence above. To cultivate emotional sovereignty is to cultivate the ocean within. The storms of the world can crash endlessly, yet the depths remain unshaken. Those who lack this depth are easily moved. They react impulsively, speak too quickly, lash out or cower. Their energy is drained in vain, spent defending illusions rather than acting with purpose. The world finds them pliable, weak, and susceptible. Pressure becomes a tool against them, because they have given it permission to exist. To achieve emotional sovereignty, one must practice observation and reflection. Every impulse, every surge of anger, every flicker of fear must be recognized. The moment you feel the pull of pressure, pause, trace it to its source, examine its legitimacy. Often you will find it stems not from the world, but from your own attachment, your own expectations, your own reliance on approval. When you identify the root, you can release it. You can let it drift away, like smoke carried on the wind. Do not clutch at the emotion. Do not fight it blindly. Observe, understand, and release. Only then can the mind remain unshaken. Emotional sovereignty also requires detachment, not from life, but from external validation. The opinions of others, their attempts to control or provoke, have power only if you grant it to them. If your center is rooted in self-understanding, in purpose, in clarity, then the judgments of the world cannot penetrate. They are like whispers against stone. This is the mastery of self. The one who has cultivated it does not react with anger, does not flinch in fear, does not seek approval. Their energy is conserved, their focus precise, their will intact. The world may scream, threaten, and tempt, but the sovereign mind remains unbroken. Consider the willow in the wind. It bends, but it does not break. Its roots are deep, its trunk flexible yet firm. Those who are impossible to pressure are like this willow. They sway when necessary, adapt without losing form, and absorb disturbance without damage. The practice of emotional sovereignty is long and solitary. It requires patience, observation, and reflection. You must learn to watch yourself as a detached observer, noticing each emotional surge, each flicker of reaction. You must learn to respond deliberately, not impulsively, and you must learn that true power is invisible. It does not need to strike to be absolute. Those who are easily moved waste their strength. They expend energy in defending fragile egos, in reacting to provocation, in attempting to control what cannot be controlled. Those who have mastered themselves conserve their energy. They move silently, deliberately, with purpose. They act only when necessary. And when they do, their action is unstoppable. Emotional sovereignty transforms life. It allows clarity in chaos, focus amidst distraction, and strength in vulnerability. It renders the individual impossible to manipulate, impossible to provoke, impossible to pressure. The world may rage endlessly, but the sovereign mind remains calm, precise, and unwavering. In this state, freedom emerges, not the freedom of indulgence or pleasure, but the freedom of absolute self-mastery. The storms of life may continue, but they are no longer chains. They are merely weather, passing over the deep, immovable mind. To cultivate emotional sovereignty is to claim the ultimate independence. It is to walk among the chaos of the world without being touched. It is to exist as a force unseen, unmovable, and impossible to pressure. And once you achieve this, you will realize the truth. The world may test you, but it cannot touch you. It may scream, but you hear only clarity. It may strike, but you remain unbroken. In this calm, in this depth, you are unstoppable. I have observed those who bend and those who break, and I have observed those who remain. There is a principle that separates them: immutability. To be immutable is not to be rigid, it is not to be unfeeling, it is to achieve a state of being in which no external force can disturb your center. The practice of immutability begins with observation. Each time the world applies pressure, do not respond immediately. Feel the impulse to act, to react, to defend, and observe it without judgment. Trace it to its origin. Most often it arises not from the world itself, but from the echoes of your own fears and insecurities. Observation alone is not enough. One must cultivate detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean abandoning life. It means understanding that the judgments, expectations, and manipulations of others have power only when you grant it to them. Remove that grant, and their influence vanishes. Anchor yourself in purpose. Actions guided by principle, not impulse, are immovable. If your mind is rooted in clarity, then the storms of the world cannot sway you. Pressure finds no purchase in one whose path is deliberate and whose intention is unwavering. A mind guided by principle is like a mountain, unmovable, enduring, and impervious to the winds of chaos. Respond, do not react. Reaction is vulnerability. It is the surface flinching at disturbance, often revealing more than intended. Response is control. It is deliberate. It is precise. It is the difference between those who are moved by the world and those who move the world. The practice of immutability requires solitude. Alone, you confront your fears. Alone, you observe your impulses. Alone, you refine the mind to resist disturbance. In this isolation, clarity emerges. The world's judgments are stripped away, leaving only truth, and in truth, there is strength beyond the reach of pressure.